This is episode 94 of the 99 Forever podcast. I'm Eric Friesen, and my guest tonight is making his debut on the podcast, hockey YouTuber Austin Hockey. Austin, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure, man. So how much better is your weekend going after a massively important Oilers overtime win last night?
It's going way better than I thought it could have went, especially, tied going in overtime. We know the Oilers have struggled in overtime in the playoffs in recent memory, but I'm really glad that they were able to pull out the win.
And for yourself, another guy who produces Oilers content, that aspect becomes a lot easier too, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. 100%. When the team's winning and you're feeling good, I find it's a lot easier to produce content that is, really good and positive for the community. When the Oilers are losing and the community's down, I try and keep spirits up, but sometimes that can be difficult too.
Yeah, and I've said this on past episodes, but Oilers fans are extremely passionate, and sometimes that can lead to being extremely positive or negative depending on the results. But yeah, the vibes looked great in Oil Country last night. Every time they showed the Moss Pit on TV, everyone was going nuts after that overtime goal, and all the goals really. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it just looked like a great place to be, and it's going to get even better as the series now heads home.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I expect the Oilers crowd is going to be absolutely wild tomorrow night against the Canucks at home.
Yeah, I think just everyone is just feeling great about taking back home ice advantage, and I can't wait for Game 3 at Rogers Place. I think it's going to be deafening loud for puck drop.
Absolutely. Could not agree more.
And tonight we'll be recapping games 1 and 2 of the Oilers' second round series against the Vancouver Canucks. But Austin, since you're a first-time guest on the show, I'd just like to start by hearing a little about your own background as a fan of this team. So let's just start at the beginning. When did you first start following the NHL, and how did you become a fan of the Oilers?
Yeah, absolutely. So growing up, I remember my dad, he always had hockey on the TV when I was a kid. One of my earliest memories growing up was watching Todd Marchand's Game 7 OT winner against the Stars in 1997. I was probably almost 4 years old at that point. But that moment and that memory is kind of what solidified my interest in hockey. My dad's influence is really what got me into the game and to become a huge Oilers fan. When I got a little bit older, he put me in organized hockey. I played for 7 years. I suffered an injury in Pee Wee, and that kind of took my passion away from playing the game, but it actually increased my passion for the sport more in becoming a fan and an observer and analyzing. So analyzing and watching through my teens and early 20s, I really grew a newfound love for the game, especially towards analytics now that I'm in my 30s here. And I don't really have any regrets for, not continuing to play when I was younger. But I still do play. I do play on a no-hit rec league here in my city that I live in. So,
and like you said, 97, you were pretty young for that run. That was the first year that I really followed the NHL too. I was 8 in the 97 playoff run when the Oilers upset the Dallas Stars in the first round. But that was sort of a second win for the Oilers organization, because they had been to the playoffs for the first 13 years that they'd been in the NHL. And then in the mid-90s, they sort of bottomed out after all of their legends had left town, and after missing those the playoffs for those 4 years. 97, I feel like, was the rejuvenation, I think, for the Oilers fan base.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though I was very young, I just do remember the impact that had, especially with my dad being a big Oilers fan and being in that household. It was pretty special to witness and even still be able to remember. There's a lot that I don't remember from a month ago, and the fact that I remember that from 26 years ago is pretty special.
For sure. And who were your favorite Oilers players when you were growing up, and why?
So growing up, I immediately fell in love with Ryan Smith. When I played hockey, I used to grow the exact same style mullet and flow when I was a kid. And I emulated my entire game after his, same type of wooden stick. I played left wing, and I just tried to score goals in the crease all the time. That's how I used to play. When he was traded, that was super devastating. I was in middle school in grade 8. My teacher, who was also an Oilers fan, he let me watch trade deadline coverage in our classroom that day. And I remember the trade deadline passed, and the Oilers didn't really make any significant moves, but it wasn't until after that they did announce Smith was traded. I was so devastated. I actually just left class and went home. I lived really close to my school, so I just went home, and my dad, he didn't even get mad. He understood. But later that year, Oilers drafted Sam Gagner, and I watched him on the London Knights, so he quickly became my next favorite player. And also when I was a kid, I really liked Tommy Salo for some reason. And goaltending isn't a position that I usually, put a lot of fandom into, but I liked Tommy Salo as well.
Yeah, I mean, 3 great picks there. I'll never forget the day Ryan Smith was traded. Similar to you, I actually stayed home from school that morning to watch Trade Center, and I was in grade 12 at the time. And I went to school in the afternoon thinking that it was all settled and that Ryan Smith was going to be staying with the team and would be signing a new contract. And then I got picked up by my dad after school, and he told me on the car ride home that after he got off work that the Oilers had traded Smith, and it was just like a punch to the gut because if you remember from the early 2000s, year after year the Oilers were having to trade away their best players because they couldn't afford them. I mean, first it was Curtis Joseph left town as a free agent, but then it was Bill Guerin leaving. Got traded to the Bruins, and then Doug Weight going to the St. Louis Blues, and just year after year that trend sort of continued. And for Ryan Smith, he was the one guy who hung around and stayed with the team through all of that, and was a big part of that run to the Stanley Cup final in 2006. So you sort of thought he was safe, and that this was going to be the first guy who was going to be a career Oiler. Kevin Lowe would be the closest to that. He did leave to go play for the Rangers for 4 years, but ended his career where it started in Edmonton. But Ryan Smith seemed like the guy who was going to be the first guy to go end to end with the Edmonton Oilers, and unfortunately, it just didn't happen. I am glad that he did come back in 2011 and play his final 3 seasons with Edmonton. But yeah, that was a tough one. As for Sam Gagner, I mean, like, I've talked about this on past episodes too, but always a big fan of him. And we're both born in '89. I love that he wears that as his jersey number. And that was one thing that I was hoping that we would get to see this spring, is that after 17 years in the NHL, that Gagner would finally have a chance to play a playoff game for the Oilers. Yeah. I mean, he's only played 11 in his entire career. And that's, because he's played for some pretty bad teams for most of his time. I think the only teams he ever made it with were the Flyers and the Blue Jackets. But this was a time when he was actually going to get that opportunity. He should have had it in 2020 when he was dealt at the deadline for Andreas Athanasiou to the Red Wings. But it doesn't look like he's going to be getting in the lineup unless there are multiple injuries. So a little disappointing, especially because it sounds like his career might be coming to an end this summer. But if that does happen, it sounds like he's probably going to be joining the organization in some type of a front office role.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that.
And I mean, Tommy Salo too. I had a poster of him on my wall as a kid too. So he was a very popular player in oil country in the late 90s, early 2000s. Never ended up winning a playoff series in Edmonton, despite having to go up against some pretty tough opponents in the first round. Those Dallas Stars teams, just the Oilers gave them everything they had. But in the end, they just didn't have the talent to get over the hump, other than that first year they played them in 1997.
Yeah, exactly.
And what do you remember about your first Oilers game at the old Northlands Coliseum?
So I kept the ticket stub from that game. I've had it since I went. It was on November 16th, 2002 against the Los Angeles Kings. I would have been 8 years old. I vividly remember the Skyreach Center logo when it was called Skyreach Center.
They changed names a few times there.
They did, yeah. I remember there was like a bluish purple hue of the lighting on the outside of the building. And I remember being really nervous. I think just the size of the building and the amount of people really overwhelmed me as a kid, but in like a good way. It was like a really positive adrenaline. I remember walking into the Coliseum. Our seats were in the second level. So walking up the stairs and through the tunnel and then getting to see NHL ice with the scoreboard. And it was just a memory I'll never forget. But I didn't know I had a fear of heights until that day. So my dad had to actually help me get to my seat because I was too scared to actually walk up the stairs into the more nosebleed area of the rink. And yeah, it was my first time experiencing a game with no announcer. So that was really strange as a 9-year-old kid who, getting go to live hockey games often. I lived 2 hours away from Edmonton. Getting used to that. Getting used to it. So, and the crowd, I don't remember it being dead silent, but it wasn't as lively as sometimes the TV makes it sound. And I do remember the Oilers only scored one goal. I think Yanni Niinema was actually the one who scored it. The Oilers lost 4-1, but it was a memory I'll never forget. One of my favorite times ever as a fan.
Oh yeah, I mean, you never forget that first game, and for the newer generation of Oilers fans, the younger generation who only know Rogers Place, I mean, they are getting to go to a state-of-the-art arena, and that is fantastic. It's something that the city of Edmonton needed for a long time. It probably should have been built 10 years earlier than it was, but the memories from the old Northlands Coliseum, those will last with us forever, and I'm glad that this generation, or our generation of Oilers fans, were sort of the last one that had time to go there. I attended games there for 10 years, from 2006 when I went to my first game till my final game in 2016, and I am glad that McDavid also played there for one season as well. It was a bit of a crossover from the Gretzky era, the arena that Gretzky built to Rogers Place now being the arena that McDavid built. Yeah,
it was like a really nice like a turning of the page, a new chapter. I loved that transition. I do love that McDavid got to play in the building. I still remember the Rexall Place when they did the final ceremony in that final game. Oh, yeah. They had all the alumni there, and
I think there was over 200 Oilers players or something like that came out onto the ice for that ceremony.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Do you also remember the opening ceremony for Rogers Place? It was a Battle of Alberta. I'll never forget this day, October 12th, 2016. It was the day that they unveiled the Gretzky statue in its new home after moving it over from what was then still Rexall Place. But Mark Messier and Wayne Gretzky skated out onto the ice in Oilers jerseys and saluted the crowd with holding their sticks above their head. And that was another sort of passing of the torch, saying, we're now handing it over to this next group. And then McDavid, of course, was the first player to come skating out onto the ice, leading the Oilers on, shot the puck into the net for warm-ups. And it was like, okay, now it's just like, it was almost ceremonial in that sense of now it's passing on. It's your turn to take it.
Yeah, no, 100%. I had forgotten about McDavid coming out and shooting the puck into the net. So that was really interesting.
I'm sure they had
my memory from that. Yeah, 100%.
I never heard any confirmation that that's how they planned it. But after Messier and Gretzky came out and saluted the crowd, did a couple laps around the ice wearing Oilers jerseys and then just Oilers sort of wind pants, they went off, and usually it's the goaltender that leads the team onto the ice for the warm-ups, but I just thought it was probably for this instance they wanted McDavid to be the first player to skate out onto the ice. He was the new 19-year-old captain of the team, had just been named captain a week earlier, so it was sort of his time to take it over and be the next lead for this franchise.
Yeah, no, exactly, and it was also really cool. Their first year in the new building, making the playoffs for the first time in over a decade, and you could finally put the decade of darkness to rest. And we truly were in the current era that we are in now with McDavid and Draisaitl here.
Oh yeah, and it was a win for everybody. I mean, for the fans, you get this brand new building. You want to have playoff hockey there right away. I'm sure the organization, after spending around $500 million on the arena district to have this playoff run that went to the second round and one game away from going to the conference final, to at least put a few dollars back in their pockets after spending so much to make that happen. But that first year is something we'll never forget. And they turned it around so quickly. There were so many players on the team that had career years, and unfortunately they weren't able to follow it up, missing the playoffs the next 2 years in a row after that before finally getting back on track in 2019-20, the first pandemic season. But that was a great start to for the organization in that new building.
Yeah, 100%.
And what is your favorite memory of watching the Oilers, either on TV or live in person?
So this is there's a lot that I could choose from. Obviously, I've never seen the team win a cup in my lifetime. One of the big ones was Sam Gagner's 8-point night against Chicago in February of 2012. I actually did burst into tears when he got the 8th point, and I probably would have passed out if he had managed to get the 9th point. I remember they kept putting him out late in the game. I remember they kept putting him out late in the game, and he was dead tired. He took himself off the ice, I think, the last minute or two, because he they just kept putting him out to try and get it. But I think the memory that does stick out the most to me was Game 5 against the Carolina Hurricanes in the 2006 Cup Finals, with Edmonton down 3-1 in the series. The game went to overtime. Steve Stais takes that penalty, and the dread I felt sitting there with my dad. I remember I could barely even look at the TV. My stomach was in knots, and I'll never forget Bob Cole's call. Rest in peace, Bob Cole. He was a huge influence on me. But the giveaway at the Hurricanes' blue line by Rod Brind'Amour, Pisani in alone, shorthanded on the breakaway, roofing that puck over Cam Ward's glove to keep the Oilers' hopes alive. My dad and I, we screamed and jumped around for probably 5 straight minutes. We spilled our food and drink all over the place. Like, it was just pure elation. I did believe at the time that team was a team of destiny, but hopefully I get to have another Cup Finals memory like that one day.
Yeah, and it was so huge for our generation of Oilers fans because it was their first trip to the Stanley Cup Final in 16 years. And to have that signature moment, I mean, I think that's without a doubt a top 5 goal in Oilers history.
Yeah. I would think so. And obviously there's been some pretty incredible goals scored throughout the history of this team. Gretzky's 50 and 39 is a big standout too. But that one for me is really what sticks out. And I think really elevated, my passion for the team and hockey to like just another level.
Yeah. I mean, the two that would come to mind for Gretzky right away would be, like you said, the 50 and 39. Also Game 2 of the 1988 series against the Flames, his shorthanded slap shot goal over the shoulder of Mike Vernon. It's one of those ones that even though it happened about 6 months before I was born, I can still vividly picture it. And for most Oilers fans, they've seen that goal in their life. I mean, we talked about the 1997 playoffs, Todd Marchand's breakaway goal as he blazed down the wing and ended up putting it past another former Oilers goalie, Andy Logue. So a lot of Oilers tie-ins there. And then the Fernando Pisani goal, at least in the salary cap era, that still remains the biggest goal that the franchise has seen. I think second to that would be McDavid's series-winning goal in overtime against the Flames 2 years ago.
Yeah, that one, absolutely. That was the next one that I would have mentioned.
David Desharnais' goal against the Sharks in 2017. That's a big one,
that was a good one. Yeah, in overtime. I remember the Oilers in that overtime game were just all over the Sharks, and I was getting so concerned the more that overtime went that it was going to be a dumb goal against, and Desharnais jumped off the boards. I remember the pass into the slot area, and he just roofed it. Unbelievable.
And I mean, obviously we saw a overtime winner last night, but most of the playoff overtime goals in the McDavid era have been on the road, and that Desharnais one was... I'm trying to think if that is the only one that's been at Rogers Place.
I think so. I can't remember another one at Rogers.
There have been several on the road. Like we talked about the one in Calgary. There was Hyman's goal last year in LA.
Yeah.
But most of the goals, like I said, have come on the road. So that was another reason why when Game 2 against the Kings in the last round went to overtime, I thought it would be so cool if the Oilers could score here. Not because I was overly concerned that the Oilers weren't going to be able to beat the Kings, regardless of how that game turned out, but just so that they could have a playoff overtime winner at Rogers Place. I think the building, the roof would have come off that place.
Yeah, it'll explode. The next time there is an overtime that Edmonton wins at Rogers Place, it will explode, like 100%.
Let's hope that we don't have to go through that stress in the next 2 games and the Oilers are able to just take care of business in regulation, though.
I was going to say, yeah.
And what is your we talked about your favorite memory. Even from this past season, is there one that really stands out, or is it would it be last night's goal, as we just sort of alluded to?
I think last night's goal had a lot of weight just taken off. I think a lot of Oilers fans' chests. I think we're able to just breathe a bit of a sigh of relief now because we hadn't beaten Vancouver at all this season, playoffs included. So I think the goal last night, is probably the biggest goal so far in overtime because you lose that game, you're down 0-2 heading back home, and then the mental game starts to kick in. Can we actually beat the Canucks? That's with the fans and maybe even the players too. And the players, they'll never admit if that's in their head or not, but certainly it would probably play a bit of a factor. So being able to split on the road, I mean, that's huge.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, you don't want to give your opponent an edge at all. And hopefully there are more memorable moments to come during this playoff run. And before we move on, I also wanted to ask about your YouTube channel. And I'm sure there are Oilers fans listening to this podcast who are familiar with your work. But for anyone who hasn't checked it out before, how often do you post videos on there, and what type of content can they expect to see?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I post daily. I think in the last 2 months, there's been 2 or 3 days total that I have not uploaded. It was around the trade deadline. I came up with a really bad cold, and I just didn't have a voice to record. But I do upload daily, and it is 95% Oilers related. But now that the playoffs have hit, and the Oilers sometimes have more than a day off, I do try and cover other hockey aspects. Most of my content is pregame reports, and then some sort of post-game recap. That's kind of what I rolled with during the regular season. Right now, during the playoffs, I do live stream reaction and commentary during games. Last night, the overtime winner, my heart rate hit 152 beats per minute, and I almost passed out. So hopefully I don't actually pass out on a stream due to excitement.
No, I'm hoping that you stay with it for the whole game as well, my friend. And I wasn't planning on asking this before, but when I've watched your videos, I've seen you change your Oilers jersey from video to video, and I'm a big jersey guy myself, so I just wanted to quickly ask before we get into the series, how many different Oilers jerseys do you have?
I have, I think, 6 or 7 different jerseys. I have the reverse retro 1.0. I have a Sam
that's the
Gagner,
one that I really wanted. I'm jealous of that one. I got to find that on eBay or something somewhere.
Yeah. I'm lucky I got one. I think I got it as a gift. I think my parents found it for Christmas, not even where I live. I think they mailed it to me. But I have a Gagner Royal Blue jersey. That was actually my first jersey that I ever owned in any capacity as a teenager. So that was really nice. And then I have a couple others. I have the McFarlane jersey as well, and then I have a Ryan Smith Road, and a couple other ones.
Nice. Yeah, I have a fairly extensive Oilers jersey collection too, but whenever I have a chance to talk to different Oilers fans about their jersey collections, I'm just always interested to see what they've got. And from the videos I've seen, I knew that I had seen the McFarlane in one, and most recently I think you were wearing in last night's the reverse retro 1.0, which is a very popular one. I regret not getting it sooner, as I do with the Heritage Classic jersey this year. I thought about getting it because I was in Edmonton for the Heritage Classic in October, but I knew that I was going to be back because I typically come out to Edmonton about 4 times a year for games.
Yeah.
And I thought on one of my next trips I'll get it. And then I kept hearing from people in Edmonton that I knew that most of the stores around town were either sold out of them or weren't getting restocked. So I was a little disappointed with that because I thought that they would probably sell them all season, especially because the Oilers wore those jerseys in 2 other games against the Flames.
Yeah, I was going to say they wore them numerous times. It wasn't just like a one-off.
I was even at one of those games in February. Unfortunately, the Oilers lost that game. It was the only game that they lost to the Calgary this year, but yeah, it would have been great. I think they would have sold a ton more, and they probably underestimated how popular that jersey would be, because if they would have kept selling them right until, I think even today, people would be buying them.
I agree 100%. And I initially, when they unveiled them, I initially wasn't a huge fan, but as the season progressed and once they wore them that second time, and they really started to grow on me. And by the time I got to a point where I was like, oh, I actually really want one of these. Yeah, they were sold out. Would never be able to find one.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those Amazon or eBay searches that I kind of mentioned. But anyway, man, like I said, I have watched your videos before. I think you do a great job. So I'm sure your channel is just going to continue to grow from here.
I hope so. I appreciate the kind words and a lot of things on my channel too. I just try and be as neutral as I can, as much as an Oilers fan can be. But I also just try and give good analysis. I try and give the opponents their due diligence, especially when they're playing well. I don't want to I just try and come across as a positive influence too. So.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, we can always have more positivity in the Oilers community. All right, let's dive into this series now. And in Game 1, the Oilers jumped out to a 4-1 lead in the second period. However, the Canucks responded with 4 unanswered goals to secure a 5-4 victory and a 1-0 series lead. Austin, what was the most disappointing part of that loss to you? The fact that the Oilers squandered a 3-goal lead to one of their biggest rivals, or that they went more than 22 minutes without a shot on goal?
I think the biggest disappointment, and you just alluded to it, going 22 minutes without a shot, was just after the first 10 minutes of the first period, they just didn't play Oilers hockey. They didn't play the hockey that we were used to seeing even against the LA Kings and during the regular season. Their 5-on-5 play, their puck management, their defensive awareness, the goaltending, like it was a collapse from top to bottom in that lineup. And obviously Draisaitl was hurt in the second period. He barely played at all in the second. He did come out for the third, but he was nowhere near 100%. And the team, they looked gassed. And for a team that was off for almost a week, it was strange. And, you got to give a lot of credit to the Canucks because, I mean, they were feeding off the crowd energy. And once they made it 4-3 in the third, you could really feel the shift. And you could, I didn't say it on the live stream, but mentally, I was like, I could see the Canucks coming back here. Like, this is not a good situation to be in.
Yeah, and look, some of that is probably score effects. Teams that are trailing are generally going to be pushing harder to tie it up, and the team with the lead will often sit back. But to play more than a third of the game without a shot on goal is just unacceptable for an Oilers team with this much high-end skill. And it shouldn't matter how good the Canucks are at limiting shots in their own end. Flat out, the Oilers needed to find a way to generate more chances in the third period, especially against a goalie who looked shaky at best through the first half of the game. And when the Oilers still had a 2-goal lead, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins put a shot off the post. And if that puck goes in, the Oilers would have gone up 5-2 and probably won that game. Unfortunately, the Canucks scored not too long after that, like, as you said. And unfortunately, all of a sudden, it's a 1-goal game and they had all the momentum. And on the last episode, I talked about what an excellent job the Oilers did of closing out the Los Angeles Kings in the third period of Game 5 with their season on the line. Yeah. And although the Canucks are a better offensive team than the Kings, that game is one the Oilers should have wrapped up.
Yeah, I think anytime you have a 3-goal lead, whether you deserve to have the 3-goal lead or not, it is hockey. Not the best team doesn't always win in a 1-game sample size. If you have a 3-goal lead in the playoffs, in the second period, late in the second too, Lindholm didn't score until about 2:59 remaining in the second. So I agree 100%. It's unacceptable to lose a game like that. It shouldn't happen. But we've seen in the playoffs this year, there's been a lot of 3-goal leads being blown.
It's not like the Oilers are the only team this has happened to. You just look at that Colorado-Dallas series, and it seems like no lead is safe there, even if they are up 3 or 4-0.
Yeah, exactly.
But for the Oilers, like I said, when you're about 25 minutes away from the finish line and you have that 3-goal lead, it doesn't matter if you're playing against an elite team or a bottom feeder. You've got to find a way to get that one to the end. And I mean, those 2 goals that they allowed back to back were just backbreakers. And let's talk about Stuart Skinner now. I thought he was solid early on, but ultimately he finished the night with a dismal .792 save percentage. Austin, I'm a big fan of Skinner. I think he's had some strong outings in the playoffs so far, but 3 goals allowed in the third period, including 2 in 39 seconds. You need a save on one of those, don't you?
I 100% agree with that. And Stuart Skinner, on my channel all year, even when he was struggling, I have been adamant. Don't trade him. He doesn't need someone to platoon with him. He can get the job done. I have been a huge Skinner supporter. And, right now he's showing... Well, he's bringing back some, concerns and PTSD from the Vegas series last year, with the just not making a big save in the moment. You just need a save. And in the third, with the team, sometimes the team in front of you is not going to be playing their best. That's where you need your goalie to help steal one. And Skinner, he didn't help steal one, unfortunately. He was part of the reason why they lost, which is unfortunate as someone that loves how he plays and just, him being on the team and someone that goes to bat for him all the time. I can't really defend that Game 1 performance.
Yeah, and like I said, I thought Skinner played pretty well for a good chunk of that game. I mean, he denied Garland on a breakaway. He made a nice glove save on Lindholm from the right circle. Yeah. He stopped Mikheyev in the crease after he walked out from behind the net with the puck. However, there were a couple goals in this one that I'm sure he would like back. Lindholm's goal was just an unlucky bounce off Skinner's stick. I can't blame him on the JT Miller goal. That was just a great deflection that he had little chance on. And he was screened by his own teammates on the Zadorov one-timer. But that Garland goal is one that he has to have just to settle things down and give his team a chance to try and take back the lead, but it just wasn't his night.
No, it wasn't. And I was actually a little surprised. I thought when Vancouver tied it, I thought Chris Knobloch was maybe going to use his timeout just to settle the boys down, just tell them to breathe, relax. But, next shift after the tying goal, Garland goes in, puts that goal through the 5-hole, got around Nurse. And Nurse, there's a lot of controversy with his play lately. He did put Garland to an area on the ice where you shouldn't score from, but Garland still managed to put the puck in the net. So it was pretty discouraging.
Yeah, and that's a good point, too, about Knobloch using his timeout. That would have, I think, been a key time to try and utilize that because, like you said, sometimes you just want to kill their momentum if you can. Mm-hmm. And that might have been a chance. And even though the crowd is going to be going nuts through the whole 30 seconds that you have your guys over by the bench, let the crowd go crazy. Just give the guys a chance to settle down, get the line out there that you want, and try to get this thing headed back in the right direction. But the Canucks just continued to pile it on. And like we said, it didn't take them long to end up getting the game tying and ultimately game winning goal there. Yeah,
exactly. And, both goals coming with less than 6 minutes remaining in regulation or 7 minutes remaining. Yeah, it's the Garland goal. That was the backbreaker when Edmonton was down 5-4. Despite the fact that Edmonton has the skill and capacity to come back, I never felt like they were ever going to be able to come back, which was very unfortunate.
Yeah. All right, so with Adam Henrique out for Game 1 with an injury, head coach Chris Knobloch moved Matthias Janmark up to the top line alongside Connor McDavid and Zach Hyman. Yeah. And despite playing with the Oilers' leading goal scorer and point getter, Janmark didn't have much of an impact in that spot. Austin, how would you have restructured the lines for Game 1 with Henrique on the shelf?
With Janmark on that top line, obviously his penalty killing has been phenomenal, especially in the postseason so far. And, you're looking for maybe a player that can grind the corners, hit a few bodies. Janmark didn't even have a hit in Game 1 playing with McDavid and Hyman in that situation. And a lot of people don't like it just because of the age factor and the experience. But I truly would have put someone with a bit more speed and skill up there and in Dylan Holloway. And if you want someone to grind in the corners and maybe lay a hit and just try and make space for McDavid and Hyman, Dylan Holloway is someone that I definitely would have considered putting there, or even Warren Foegele. I'm shocked that Foegele wasn't given that opportunity, considering he had 20 goals in the regular season and has played up there periodically throughout the year too. So that was an interesting
maybe
decision.
Because he was quiet a little bit in the playoffs, aside from scoring that empty net goal in Game 1.
I could see the logic there because Foegele, other than the empty net goal, obviously his impact on the ice hasn't been, incredibly positive in terms of point production, but he still has the speed and that grinding mentality where, and he does have skill. He has a good shot. It was interesting. I think I know what Knobloch was trying to do. But at the same time, I didn't agree with it at the time. Still don't agree with it now. And I'm glad he made adjustments for Game 2.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned Holloway too, because I've talked about this before, that I think that he does need to get an opportunity to see if he can really hang with the big guys. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be an elite offensive producer, but they didn't draft him 14th overall to play on the third and fourth line. This is a guy that you're hoping is going to be a 50-plus point player who can be the third best player on a skilled line. And like you said, give you some speed, give you some physicality, and hopefully chip in offensively here and there. And I mean, when I look at that top line, yes, they did score an even strength goal, but the Oilers needed a lot more from them. I still think Hyman played a good game. He scored twice, including his league-leading 9th goal of the playoffs. It wasn't a great game for McDavid, though. He kept his playoff point streak alive with an assist on Hyman's second goal, but he was held without a shot for the first time in his NHL career in a playoff game. And same for Janmark, 0 shots on goal. Mm-hmm. And I think Knobloch expected Janmark to be the defensive conscience on that line, while McDavid and Hyman provided the scoring. But I would have bumped Nugent Hopkins back up to the first line and reunited the best line in hockey all season. And then you could have had Brown slide into his spot on Draisaitl's wing for a game. Yeah. And honestly, I mean, we talked about Gagne a little while ago. I wouldn't have minded if they inserted Gagne into the lineup and given him a shot with McDavid before Janmark. And that's not just because I want to see Gagne finally get into a playoff game with the Oilers this spring, but he had 5 goals in 28 games this season, despite playing only 10 minutes a night. Mm-hmm. And I think that he would have been so fired up to get that opportunity.
Oh, 100%. I agree 100%. I've been trying to push for Gagne to get back in the lineup. I know why he's not in the lineup, and just overall during the playoffs, everyone has their role, and for the most part, they've been playing their role well. But yeah, I agree. Gagne over Janmark is someone that I would have considered as well. Yeah, and I've been hard on Janmark on my own YouTube channel and like my own content. I am very hard on Janmark. I maybe a little too hard. I've had fans call me out on it. So I try and put my bias aside here. I just don't think a player of that type should be with the best player in the world. No, like
asking him to go from playing on the fourth line to riding shotgun with McDavid. That's a big ask.
It's a huge ask, especially in, you haven't played in a week. It's the playoffs. You're in a barn where the opponent's crowd is all over you at all times. I just felt in that moment, if you don't want to put Holloway there because of his age and experience, get someone else that can at least possibly keep up.
Okay, well, let's say they put Nugent Hopkins. Let's say they bump Nugent Hopkins back up to the top line. Are you weakening Draisaitl's line too much?
Possibly. Depends who you would have replaced Nugent Hopkins with on that second line. You mentioned Brown could have been slotted up there. So you could make the argument that does weaken Draisaitl's line, but you also hope that Draisaitl isn't getting the top line matchups against the Canucks, even though they do get the last change. Tocchet would do his best to make sure his best players are out against the weaker opponent or players.
Or why not just maybe shorten the bench a little bit later in the game and reunite Draisaitl with Foegele and McLeod, and maybe you just you make a different third line, sort of a makeshift third line, and then the fourth line doesn't see the ice too much.
Yeah, no, I agree with that too. Even McLeod, I know he's centering that third line, but even if you had thrown him up there, and I think the thing that confuses me more is Knobloch. He had said that it was going to be a by committee thing on that top line. A lot of us going into the game, we knew Janmark was starting on it, but we didn't think he would play on it consistently throughout the game. I did think Knobloch was going to rotate guys around just to get different looks, but he didn't really start doing that till the second period when Draisaitl went down. And then in the third, Draisaitl was with McDavid just to shelter Dry's minutes. But yeah, in the end, it didn't work out.
Yeah, and ultimately, I mean, you could say that his plan was working out through nearly 2/3 of that game when the Oilers were up 4-1.
True,
and most of that was that they were getting contributions from throughout the lineup, so you didn't need the top line to be the biggest difference maker for you that game. I said they scored one even strength goal. Hyman's other goal came on the power play, but you got a goal from Matthias Janmark. You got a goal from Cody Ceci. So when you're getting two defensemen chipping in, that sort of helps out a little bit from the top line having an off night.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can sit here and talk about Janmark too, but like you had mentioned, McDavid was not on his game either. 0 shots, first time in his playoff career, held without a shot. That whole line, just their expected goals for percentage. I'm an analytics person. I'm not sure if you're super into that, but that whole line just in general, and it didn't matter who was being rotated up there. McDavid he looked a step behind, which is very strange for McDavid.
I always say that I have just a basic level understanding of advanced analytics. I'm more of a traditional stats guy. Anyone who follows me knows that I post a lot of stats about goals and assist leaders as opposed to the underlying numbers that some people like to dig into a little bit more. But I do have time for them, and I'm always interested when people who do have a greater understanding of how those numbers work explain them in a tangible way. So, yeah, it would have been great to see that line come through a little bit more. But like I said, as much as we can blame Janmark for not contributing much when he got in that spot, when McDavid has a bit of an off night himself, I don't know how much you can put on Janmark for that too.
Well, yeah, exactly. And sometimes the best player in the world is going to have an off night, and you hope that the team around you can pick up some slack. And like you mentioned, Ekholm scored and Ceci scored. If Cody Ceci is scoring and you in a game where you're up 4-1, you would hope that you find a way to win that one. So yeah, that comes down to just the overall team performance.
It does. And even Wayne Gretzky had bad games in his career. So we can't say that you expect McDavid to be amazing every single night. And look, he still even kept his point streak alive, even in a game when he wasn't on top of his game. So
exactly.
Yeah. All right. And like you mentioned earlier, Leon Draisaitl left game one in the second period due to cramping and equipment issues, according to Knobloch, but he returned for the third period. However, 2 days later, Knobloch said that Draisaitl would be a game time decision for game two. Austin, how concerned were you that Draisaitl wasn't going to be available to play in the biggest game of the season?
I was incredibly concerned just from how much time he missed in game one in the second period. He came out on the ice, tried to skate a little bit, immediately left after an 8-second shift, didn't return until the third. And then in the third period, he played I think 6 or 7 minutes, but he just was not he couldn't control the puck. He refused to get bumped along the boards. He wouldn't, battle for the puck along the boards. Something was clearly ailing him. And then the next day he's not at practice. And you have Gagne taking the line rushes in his spot. And then Knobloch saying game time decision, and all the signs pointed to Draisaitl not being in the lineup. But Draisaitl took warmups, and I'm really glad he ended up playing. And he ended up playing one of the best playoff games I can remember from him. Him and McDavid went nuclear. So,
yeah, and that's saying a lot for a guy who has been one of the best playoff performers over the past, I guess, since 2017 when he made his playoff debut. Draisaitl has been consistently great in the playoffs. And yeah, it's always concerning when one of your best players is dealing with any type of injury and going to miss potentially any time. And I had a feeling that it was more than just cramping because Draisaitl played with a high ankle sprain in the playoffs 2 years ago. But for that same reason, I was confident that he was going to play in game two. Draisaitl does not miss time very often. He's very durable and he's a playoff beast. So even though I'm sure he's not at 100% right now, he's not going to sit out unless the doctors tell him he absolutely cannot play. And as you said, he ended up having a great game.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a testament to Draisaitl too. He's at his best when he slows the game down. And if he's not 100%, just his ability to slow the game down and still make plays and be a massive positive impact when he's on the ice. We saw that against Calgary in 2022. And obviously we saw that last night against the Canucks. So
yeah, he and McDavid are extremely dominant. I mean, if you look at their playoff numbers, they're even for their entire careers. Draisaitl's actually 1 point ahead right now. He has 93 career playoff points. McDavid's sitting at 92. But my point is that year after year, even though McDavid typically is ahead of him in the regular season, come playoff time, it's a lot closer than you think. And for Draisaitl to be not at 100%, he's still able to have that type of an impact.
Yeah, and it's unbelievable, honestly. And we saw the first signs of playoff Draisaitl in 2017 against the Anaheim Ducks before he got his big contract. And a lot of people at the time thought maybe it was too much money just because, he hadn't really proven himself more than just that one playoff season. But it was a good bet. Yes, it was a very good bet. And Draisaitl has proven that was not just a one-off playoff, experience from him. He shows up when the lights are brightest. So
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things you can criticize Peter Chiarelli for from his tenure with the Edmonton Oilers, but signing McDavid and Draisaitl to their long-term deals would be two of his best moves. I'd also give him credit for even signing Oscar Klefbom to a 7-year deal at just over $4 million a year when he had played less than 82 games in his career. I believe he had 77 games on his resume when he signed that 7-year extension. And you could say that was even more of a gamble, but in an effort to keep the cap hit down by going on that long-term deal, it paid off. It's just a shame that he isn't still a part of this organization now.
Yeah, I miss Klefbom. It's so unfortunate, when a player like that career gets cut short due to injury issues. Klefbom was instrumental, and yeah.
All right, in game two, the Canucks led by a goal 3 separate times, but the Oilers fought back and tied it up 3 times as well, forcing overtime. And just over 5 minutes into the extra frame, Evan Bouchard scored the game-winning goal to lift the Oilers to a 4-3 come-from-behind road win and even the series at 1 apiece. Austin, although the Oilers never led in this game, they just didn't go away and were rewarded with a split on the road.
Yeah, no, 100%. And, game one, the Oilers got an early power play and scored. Game two, the Canucks got an early power play and scored. But, it was almost like a complete switch from how game one played out. Draisaitl got his own power play goal and, tied after one. And I felt the Oilers started slow. I didn't think they started great. I know after two, I think they were being outshot 15-13. And, I think Vancouver had some of the higher quality looks. And, you're down going to the third against a team that has proven that they can shut things down. But, as the third period was playing, the Oilers really, Chris Knoblauch basically put together like a Russian 5 unit with Ekholm, Hyman, McDavid, Bouchard, and Draisaitl. And they completely took the game over and pulled this team to overtime to get the opportunity to win.
Yeah, that's a great reference too, going back to that. I mean, it was a stressful game because going home down 2-0 and needing to win 4 out of 5 against a team you haven't beaten all season is a daunting task. But I love that the Oilers stuck with it. They scored one early on the power play, but they responded with a power play goal of their own in the opening frame. They allowed a 4-on-4 goal, but then they answered back 23 seconds later. And even after Skinner gave up that horrible goal from the half wall to put the Canucks up 3-2 in the second period, it didn't sink them. And then McDavid gets the breakaway goal in the third period that he scores on, which set the stage for Bouchard's overtime winner that deflected in off a Canucks player's stick. And look, they've been a resilient group all season. Mm-hmm. I believe they had the second most comeback wins in the league this year. And on top of that, the Oilers usually bounce back from a disappointing loss with a much better effort the following game. And thankfully for Oilers fans, that was the case on Friday night again.
Yeah, absolutely. And just referencing, the kind of switch from game one to game two, the third period in game one, it was all Canucks. The third period in game two, it was all Oilers. The Oilers outshot the Canucks 15-2. And I think Vancouver was lucky that game managed to get to overtime. I am really happy that we ended up coming out with the win because, like you said, it would have been incredibly deflating and very daunting of a task if you go down 0-2.
All right, after being held without a shot in Game 1, Connor McDavid tallied a goal and 4 points in the victory over the Canucks in Game 2. Austin, was this McDavid's greatest performance in the playoffs so far this spring?
I would say it was the most important performance that he could give at this point in the playoffs. Game 1 against the Kings, he had 5 assists, and that hadn't been done in quite some time, especially in the salary cap era. So, but in terms of the importance, what it means to the team to get this series tied, split 1-1 heading back to Edmonton, and just how much of a bounce back game that it was compared to Game 1 where he really was being limited and just didn't look like himself. I really do believe that, that was probably the best performance so far of the postseason for Connor McDavid. Definitely. Yeah,
for sure. And as you said, McDavid opened the playoffs with a 5-assist game this year, and he was the first player in 26 years to do so. So that's a pretty high bar to clear. But I think that he was even better in Game 2 of this series than he was in Game 1 against the Kings. As I mentioned, he picked up 4 points, including his 90th career NHL playoff point and 60th career NHL playoff assist. He also became the 3rd fastest player in NHL history to reach both of those marks behind only Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux. McDavid now has a league-leading 17 points in 7 playoff games this year, which is unreal. That's a 2.43.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah. 2.43 points per game in the playoffs. And after failing to register a single shot on goal 2 nights earlier, you just knew that McDavid would be extremely hungry and motivated to have a huge game. And that's exactly what he did. He factored in on all 4 of the Oilers' goals. He came through in the clutch and scored a breakaway goal in the third period, which I think has to be considered one of the biggest goals of his career. It was just an incredible performance by McDavid. And if the Oilers do go all the way and win the Cup this year, I think that this will be one of those games and moments that we look back on that help them reach their ultimate goal.
100%. Like you mentioned, if Edmonton does manage to get past the Canucks and go on a longer run here, we will definitely be looking at this game as possibly a turning point, not only for the Oilers, but just McDavid as well. And McDavid, he came out like that. His first shift on the ice, he tried a one-timer, like the second the puck got anywhere near him, like he was already in shooting mode. He was already in a zone where you could tell, okay, he's ready to go here. And that was really good to see. That first shift kind of set the tone, I think, for the entire game.
And this is something that we've seen since the 2022 playoffs, that he's been over 2 points a game consistently. Now, it's almost unheard of in this era of hockey to put up that kind of production, even in the regular season. But what do you think allows McDavid to take his game to even that next level in the playoffs?
I think, and I don't want to speculate, but I do really think that he saves his best for the playoffs, and the way he reads the ice, sees the game. I mentioned Leon Draisaitl earlier. He has an ability to slow the game down the way other players can't. And Connor McDavid has a way to speed it up where nobody can catch him. And I'm not just talking about his foot speed, just his mental ability to get to certain areas where no one else is, throw the puck into areas where you don't think the puck should be going, and all of a sudden he finds Hyman on the back door. Connor McDavid is just on a level that not many players in the NHL, if any, can even match, especially when it comes to the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think Elliot Friedman even said that on the panel last night after the game, that once McDavid picked up the puck behind his own net with a full head of steam going up the ice, he said, it's over.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I felt the same way. I was live streaming the game, doing commentary, and you could see the moment the heart rate started to. It went from about 115, and it already went up to 130 when I was watching him skate up the ice. It's like you see it coming, and the Canucks, you see it coming, and it backs the defense off. They're getting into position because they see it coming, but even if you know it's coming, you can't stop it sometimes. And Connor McDavid just has that ability to assert his will on you. And it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you're in the perfect position. He finds a way to make something happen.
And now that McDavid is at 92 points, he only needs 8 more points to reach the century mark in his career. I think he's going to get it done before the end of the series.
I could definitely see him getting it done before the end of the series, 100%. Especially if the series goes the full length of 7 games. Yeah, definitely. And if he plays like he did in Game 2, I don't see how that wouldn't be a possibility.
And the thing is, if he gets 5 more points in this series, that will be his 4th consecutive playoff series with at least 10 points, which would set a new NHL record. When you look at what he's able to do right now, do you think that there is an appreciation for the greatness that we're seeing night after night, or do we almost become numb to it after a while?
I think Oilers fans, I hope we're not becoming numb to it. I'm someone that really loves to just live in the moment. And every time, every single shift, I try not to take for granted because, we know how fast time flies, and we know, the transition to new eras. And this is something that I'm just, with Connor McDavid's skill level and how special he is as a player, this is something that I'm trying to take in and just embrace every time he steps on the ice, and hopefully continues to create memories that I'll be able to hold on to forever here. Yeah,
and it's like we hear fans from past generations still talk about Bobby Orr in the 1970s or Wayne Gretzky in the 1980s, Mario Lemieux in the 1990s, for those who can remember all of them. And I think that will be the case with McDavid. Decades from now, people will still be talking about what he was like at his peak.
Yeah, absolutely. And lots of hockey fans that I've interacted with, they bring up moments in Connor McDavid's career from early in his career. We all know his first game back from the clavicle injury where, he split 4 Columbus defenders, gets in all alone and scores in his first game back. He did something similar against the Rangers a couple seasons ago too, referencing plays from earlier in his career, as if it happened a long time ago. And it, in the grand scheme of things, it hasn't. But I agree. Once we get to his twilight and then post-career, he's going to be someone that I think most fans will look at as possibly, if not the greatest player to ever play.
I do believe that Gretzky will always be the greatest player of all time. I think that he has set the bar so high that it's unattainable for any player to reach. Even, in my opinion, Mario Lemieux is fairly firmly cemented as number 2. I have said it several times in the past that I think McDavid is already the 3rd best forward to ever play the game. He's the most advanced player to ever play. But
yeah, I guess that's what I was trying to allude to. He's probably going to be the most advanced. Yeah, for sure.
Every skill he has is elite. I will say this, though, when he does go into the Hockey Hall of Fame, which he would go in tomorrow if he retired, but when he does go in 15 years from now, he will have the greatest highlight reel of any player to ever play this game.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm not trying to disrespect the players that came before Connor McDavid, but just how dynamic he is and the highlight reels that he has created just on his own is, I mean, oh my goodness. I already referenced a couple of them, and yeah, I agree. The highlight reels and compilations that people have even put together and thrown on YouTube, it blows my mind. I go back and watch them during off seasons when I'm waiting for hockey to start up again, and my jaw it still drops when he's doing these things. So,
in the dog days of summer, watching a one or two McDavid videos, highlights from the past season is a good way to kind of get you geared up for hockey season.
Yeah, exactly.
And while McDavid and Draisaitl led the team offensively in Game 2, the Oilers' top pairing of Ekholm and Bouchard were also outstanding. I want to get your thoughts on both of them. So let's start with Bouchard. Austin, obviously scoring the overtime winner was massive, but what can you say about Bouchard's overall impact in Game 2?
So Bouchard's overall impact in Game 2, and I'll even reference Game 1, he's not afraid, and he's someone that sometimes fans, they'll get on him for not, having, I'm trying to think of the word, that energy level where sometimes it looks like he's not reading it quickly enough. He's slow to react to a play.
Too passive?
Yeah, but in the playoffs, especially Game 1 and Game 2, not only is he reading plays well, he's cutting guys off, and he's being physical. He led the defenseman in hitting in Game 1, and that's wild to me when you have, Darnell Nurse and Vinny Desharnais and Matthias Ekholm out there too. So Bouchard, he's getting involved physically. He's getting involved after whistles, and just his ability to read the plays. And he hasn't been caught out of position where you've noticed and went, oh, there's another Bouchard, gaff. He hasn't done that. And that has been massive in terms of their team success, especially in Game 2 as well.
I thought in Game 4 and 5 against the Kings in the past series might have been two of his best defensive games that he's ever played. He's always going to be known more for his offense than what he brings in the defensive end. But if he can even make steady improvements over the next few years, because let's remember, he's still only 24.
Yeah.
And playing with Ekholm, he's going to learn so much from him on how to play this game. So by the time that Ekholm eventually moves on, because there is a pretty significant age gap between the two of them. It's almost a decade. So when Ekholm does eventually move on and Bouchard has his next partner, let's hope that the lessons that he's learned from playing with him and picking up some of those defensive instincts he'll be able to carry that through and maybe even pass that along to the next guy he plays with.
Absolutely. And Bouchard, he has all the tools. He has the size, he has the weight, he has the skill to be a complete all-around defenseman. He's never going to be as dynamic as, say, Cale Makar in terms of his foot speed. And, Makar is one of those players, he's, just his offensive instincts are at a level that I hope Bouchard can hit one day, but Bouchard's never going to be known as someone that can just blow by you with his speed. But Bouchard, he has the mental ability to read the game well, and now we're starting to see that transition to his defensive game, which is also helping his offense because he's over a point per game in the playoffs here too for the Oilers. So that's really good to see, and that's a great point with Matthias Ekholm too. Well, obviously Bouchard, he had Duncan Keith before, and then he having Ekholm's influence, the way Ekholm plays, I agree with you.
And having a Cale Makar team would obviously be a huge benefit to anyone, but I'm not going to lose too much sleep over only having Evan Bouchard as my favorite team's offensive defenseman. He had 82 points this year. Yeah. And yes, is some of that due to playing with elite players like McDavid and Draisaitl, of course, and being on the best power play of all time. But he's been an offensive defenseman right from the beginning of his OHL career. This is a guy who all the way through has continued to produce at the OHL level, AHL level, now in the NHL. And I mean, what a great pick at 10th overall for the Oilers in 2018. In a redraft, I'm sure he'd go higher. Yeah, and even if he doesn't improve his offensive game for the rest of his career, if this is the peak and he can just stay at this level for the next 5 years, the Oilers will be extremely happy with that, because having an 82-point forward is great. Having an 82-point defenseman is phenomenal.
Oh, it's unbelievable, and I really hope fans aren't taking Bouchard's offensive abilities for granted here and his ability to produce. Like you mentioned, he does play, with the best players in the world, especially on the power play. A lot of his points are there, but he's also part of that. He's part of the reason why that power play is so successful. It's not just always McDavid and Draisaitl, and for Evan Bouchard, I think the team is really happy to have him. And, I'm not even looking ahead to when he has to be re-upped here from his bridge deal. I'm just going to enjoy what we have right now.
And I wouldn't get too hung up on, the odd defensive gaffe he makes or turning over the puck the odd time, because if you think about it, the best players have the puck on their stick more often. And usually the players who have the puck more are more likely to have more giveaways than players who don't touch the puck more. So Bouchard is probably always going to have the odd play where he tries to make a pass out of the zone and it gets picked off and comes back the other way. But I would still rather have a defenseman who has the confidence to make those plays. And when they do connect and he sends a player in on a breakaway, that's when you love to have a defenseman like that.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And it's so important in today's NHL with the speed and skill of forecheckers coming in on you when they dump the puck in your corner to be able to move that puck as quickly as possible, find your winger, find an outlet pass. And I find Evan Bouchard is probably the best on the team at being able to just, not spend time in his own zone for very long. He gets that puck and he finds a play, and it's not always just off the glass and out. He finds a play. He tries to get someone that's in transition so that they can attack.
And I remember reading an article, I believe it was with The Athletic, where they interviewed Paul Coffey about what he wanted to see the defensemen on this team do after he took over. And he said he wanted everyone to start making more plays, whether it's Bouchard or Vinny Desharnais. Now, Vinny Desharnais is not going to be able to make all the plays that Bouchard can make, but you're an NHL defenseman. You need to get the puck up to the forwards' hands quicker, start having the confidence to make plays. And I think that since he's come in, we've seen Vinny be a little more assertive with making those headman passes than he was in his rookie season.
Yeah, and even Vinny, he skates the puck out more too. I've noticed when Paul Coffey took over, and I think this is also just Desharnais. He's in his second year in the NHL. I think that's also just coming with his own growth and his own confidence in his abilities. But Desharnais, especially in the playoffs, his defensive game has been phenomenal. And a lot of the fancy stats will maybe disagree with me, but the eye test, his ability to break up plays, that Kings series, that 1-0 win in Game 4 for the Oilers. That was probably Desharnais' best game. Yeah, as an Oiler, in my opinion, just in terms of his defensive impact. He's out there in the final minute and a half of the game. Knobloch and Paul Coffey realized that too, and I'm super happy for Vinny.
And even though it is only his second year in the league, he is 27 years old. So this is a little bit of an older player who, really grinded it out in the minors before getting this opportunity. So it's not like he's a 22-year-old coming into the league trying to find his way. I think that having a little bit of that extra experience of pro hockey has definitely helped his transition to the league. Agreed.
And I think it was pretty well documented, his struggles in the postseason last year on defense. A lot of times it looked like he was really overwhelmed when he was out there. Anytime Desharnais and Kulak step on the ice so far in these playoffs, I'm super confident when they're out there. I really do like how they play.
And let's talk about Bouchard's defensive partner now, Mattias Ekholm. I think he played very likely one of the best playoff games of his career as well. Austin, after watching Ekholm for 2 playoff runs with the Oilers now, is it clearer than ever how badly this team needed an elite all-around defenseman like him earlier in the McDavid era?
Yeah, definitely. And I don't want to throw any kind of shade towards Darnell Nurse, who was seen as that number one lefty top pairing D-man before Ekholm came in. But I think with Ekholm, that allowed Darnell Nurse to move down on the defense of depth chart and just Ekholm, the all-around play of him, he can make a pass, he can score a goal sometimes, which is phenomenal. I love seeing that. His signature slapper from the high slot or top of the left circle, and his size and his tenacity and his he doesn't take crap from anyone. He'll muck it up after whistles, and just we haven't seen a defenseman like this, I think, on this team since Chris Pronger. And I'm not saying Ekholm is a Chris Pronger, but just that meanness in him and, his ability to assert his physical side too when he needs to.
I mean, Chris Pronger, arguably a top 10 defenseman of all time. So no one is going to come in and have that type of impact on this team. But I do think that Ekholm is the best all-around defenseman that this team has had since Pronger in 2006. And, that's almost 20 years ago. So we're talking about quite a long time to have a player who can make that type of an impact on this blue line. And it's just something that they really needed for so long.
Yeah.
I look at Ekholm and I say, this is maybe what they were hoping. We already talked about this guy, but what Oscar Klefbom might have been if he would have remained healthy. And he seemed to be trending in that direction in the 2017 playoffs. Unfortunately, he got hurt not long after that and really battled injuries throughout the rest of his NHL career. He already had injury concerns with his shoulder even before he even played his first NHL game. I believe he had shoulder surgery during the 2011-2012 season, which was his draft plus 1 year. Yeah. And it plagued him his entire career. And who knows how different things would have worked out if Klefbom remains healthy and Adam Larson stays in town. Perhaps that stays as the Oilers' top pairing. I mean, that really hurt the organization to lose their top two defensemen in short order and have to replace them on the fly. So Ekholm coming in, I don't know if Klefbom ever would have got to the level that he's at right now, but he seemed to be headed in that direction. But all I can say is having Ekholm here and being able to just, I know plus minus isn't the stat that everyone likes to point to, but the fact that has the highest plus minus in the league since he came to Edmonton a little over a year ago, and as a guy who can make an impact at both ends of the ice, it's been so valuable to this team.
Oh, yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with you. And for the big Viking and being asked to come to a new team, play a new system, and be thrust in that top pair position, a lot of
after 11 years with one organization, right?
Yeah, exactly. Played for Nashville his entire career up to that point. And, when you get moved to a new team, quite a fair distance from Nashville is Edmonton, and different environment, a whole new system. Like I mentioned, Ekholm, right from the get-go, his impact was noticeable right in his first game with the team and hasn't looked back. If anything, he's actually gotten better. And for someone that is already on the other side of 30, in terms of his age, that's remarkable to me.
Yeah, I mean, he turns 34 in about 2 weeks. So this is a guy who is closer to the end of his career, but is really showing no signs of slowing down. And look, he had a career high 45 points this season and a career high 11 goals. So this is a guy who is still putting up the best numbers of his offensive career in his 30s, finished with a plus 44 rating. I mean, and help and is, even though we talked about Bouchard taking steps in his defensive game, is still able to cover up for him a little bit when Bush does want to jump up in the play a little more too. So that pairing together has been a godsend for this team. And really, I listened to an interview that Ekholm and his wife did probably about a year ago. I think it might have still been during the season last year, where they talked about how thrilled they were to come to Edmonton because it reminded them more of Sweden. So maybe just being back in a cold climate where it feels a little more like home, maybe that's even played into this a little bit, where it's helped him just thrive in this new team.
I agree. And I think there's extra motivation too, because obviously Nashville went on that cup run in 2017. They came up short against Pittsburgh. When you're 33 years old and you get an opportunity to play with someone like Connor McDavid, I think that also plays into, this could be my last opportunity on this contract to maybe win a cup, and I'm going to do everything in my power to help this team get there. And Mattias Ekholm has definitely, just like you said, a godsend on this back end for Edmonton.
And it's always helpful to have a couple guys who've either won a cup or been to a cup final before, because having those words of wisdom in the dressing room, I think that probably is invaluable.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I've brought up the advanced metrics a couple times, but the intangibles are still incredibly important. And I think that there are so many things that you can't quantify, and a guy like Ekholm and his leadership and what he brings to younger players on the team, and not even just for defensemen like Bouchard. I think he's probably a really good presence just for any young player that's stepping into that dressing room for Edmonton too.
It is, and you think of a guy like Philip Broberg. Now, this is a player that the Oilers invested a top 10 pick in back in 2019. He's 5 years into his career now, not all of it in the NHL, but in North America at least, and next season, he should expect to be a full-time player on this team. I don't know if that means that Brett Kulak's headed out the door this summer or what, but the Oilers do need to find a spot for this guy. When you invest that high of a pick in a player, you have to find room for them. And the time has come for Broberg to step in and establish himself as an everyday NHL player. I can imagine that having a guy like Ekholm will be huge for him to just not only have another Swede there and being able to speak the same language and maybe ease the transition, but a guy that he would have looked up to on the Swedish national team as a kid, and just being able to have a guy who he can maybe model his game after and say, I'm hoping that down the road, that's the type of player I can be.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, I couldn't agree more. And Ekholm, his experience and his ability to take someone like Broberg under his wing. You know, I was hopeful that Broberg was going to be, you know, cracking the roster this season. I know last year against Vegas, Broberg played a game. I think he led all defensemen in ice time, if I remember correctly. I think he played when Darnell Nurse was out with that suspension when he was called for instigating. Yeah. And I thought Broberg played really well. And I thought that was a sign like, oh, this is it. Like, this is Broberg's time. He's going to really establish himself. It's disappointing that he hasn't yet, but you know, defensemen, they take a little bit longer. Sometimes it's a maturity thing. Sometimes it's just you're pushed down the depth chart, depending how the roster is constructed. I'm looking forward to Broberg with a full training camp with Knobloch, with Paul Coffey, with Matthias Ekholm, and yeah, hopefully he can grow into a good, effective defenseman for Edmonton.
Absolutely. And aside from the names that we've already talked about, who else impressed you in Game 2? And who do you think needs to elevate their play as the series shifts back to Edmonton for Games 3 and 4?
One player that impressed me in Game 2, funny enough, was Matthias Janmark. For how bad I thought he played in Game 1. In Game 2, he was only on the ice for one shot against, and he had a really positive expected goals for percentage. And I thought his impact, that fourth line, I wish they would have got more ice time. I thought Holloway, Janmark, and Ryan were really effective. There was a couple shifts where they established a really good forecheck in Vancouver's zone, and then that allowed the top line to come out and then continue to press and really push the pace. So Janmark was one of the players that I thought was a standout in a positive way. And then someone that I do think that really needs to elevate their game. I'm going to list a forward and a defenseman. For forwards, Corey Perry. I think Corey Perry hasn't really brought what I thought he would in the playoffs yet. I really thought that he was going to have more of an impact, and not just goal scoring, just, you know, the physicality, maybe mucking it up after a whistle. Most nights I don't even notice when Corey Perry's out there, and obviously foot speed's always been an issue, but Corey Perry in the regular season, really smart player. He was really good at getting to good scoring areas, you know, good on the forecheck. And I don't know if it's just the way the playoffs have gone, if it's a smaller sample size. I think we do need more from Corey Perry. I think we need more from that third line in general. I would like to see a goal from McLeod or Perry at this point. You need a little bit of depth here to help the top guns, because the top players are doing what they always do, and it would be nice if they had a bit of supporting help behind them. And then when it comes to the defensemen, I've hammered this on my channel a lot over the playoffs, but Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci, both of them really need to start to step it up. They have played two really poor games, in my opinion, in a row, and hopefully going back home and, you know, home ice advantage, the crowd, you get the favorable line matchups. I really want Nurse and Ceci to start to pick it up a little bit here. Nurse, he has the ability. He's a good skater. He can read plays well. It's just some of the decisions that he's made. There was a play in overtime last night where he went down on his knees and tried to play the puck with his hand at his own blue line instead of just using his stick. And I'm so confused. I don't understand. So Nurse and Ceci, they really need to pick up their game, or Edmonton is in a world of trouble.
Yeah, all good points there. I think for me, I look at a guy like Zach Hyman. I think that he had an underrated game, picked up an assist, maybe wasn't as noticeable as game 1 when he had 2 goals, but really connected well with McDavid. Had a great chance in the slot that he almost scored on. And just he's been consistently good throughout this playoff run. So I've liked his game, and I would expect him to keep it going. And I think it's almost a safe bet that he's going to tap in a power play goal on one of these next 2 games as the series goes back home. We did talk about Draisaitl and what a great game he had. Matched McDavid with 4 points in that game. Also 1 goal and 3 assists. And like we said, despite probably not being at full health, physically sound enough to take faceoffs. That was why he was moved to the wing for that game. I'm okay with those two staying together as well, because you look at how good they played during the 2022 playoffs. And yes, it might weaken some of your other lines to load up that much talent on your top line and force the opposition to really just have to shut down them. But we've seen with last change and the Oilers having now the ability to get them out against whatever pairing they want, I think that you can do that. And McDavid is fine to take the faceoffs. And if Draisaitl is able to be this elite scoring winger who can ride shotgun with it, I mean, that's a very difficult line for the Canucks to try and stop with McDavid, Draisaitl, and Hyman. So, yeah, another great game for those two, and I'd expect that to continue. It's hard not to point to Cody Ceci and Darnell Nurse as a pairing that you'd like to see better from. I think it's pretty well stated by everyone that it just hasn't been good enough defensively. Yes, Cody Ceci did score a goal, and it's not what you typically expect from him. But where you really count on him and why he's on this team is to shut down the opposition. And I don't know if they need to split that pairing up and give either Vinny a little more time maybe on Darnell Nurse's pairing, or do they insert Troy Stetcher into the lineup and potentially go with 11-7, which is more of a Jay Woodcroft type of system than Chris Knobloch. But there's a few different things they could do there to switch things up. And I'm sure that they're having meetings in the coaches' room about this, about what they can do, because Darnell Nurse needs to be better. I have higher expectations for him than Cody Ceci. So I want to see him have a really strong Game 3 on Sunday night. And I'll even say Stuart Skinner too. Yes, he did get the win in Game 4, and he did make some good saves, but I don't think that if you were to ask him, he would be too happy with either of his outings in this series so far. So I want to see him getting back closer to what he looked like in Game 3 and Game 4 against the Kings in the last series.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was going to touch on Stuart Skinner too, but you already made good points that I would have brought up. And when we talk about, the personnel decisions that they could make to help that Nurse-Ceci pair, you mentioned Troy Stetcher, and I know in a small sample size during the regular season, Nurse and Stetcher were pretty effective together, just looking at the numbers. And then, like you mentioned, 11-7, that was a Jay Woodcroft thing. I don't get the impression that Chris Knobloch would do that. But I think the coaching staff realized that pair could be an issue. And I think that's why you saw Desharnais moved up with Nurse back in February, I believe. And he was there for a few weeks. I think they tested him out to see if this can work. And I didn't mind it. I think that Vinny is probably a little over his head playing in a top 4 on a regular basis, but he could probably pinch hit there once in a while. Exactly. And maybe you could do it like you said, you're at home now, you get the favorable matchups. If you want to just give Darnell Nurse just a different look and maybe just limit Ceci's minutes a little bit. Because I think Desharnais, he's defensively sound enough where I don't think he'll be too much of an issue in his own zone. And then that will allow Darnell Nurse to maybe just, rely on his instincts a bit more. I think sometimes Nurse gets caught in a position where he thinks he has to overcorrect for Ceci in certain situations. But Darnell Nurse is at his best when he is using his body along the boards and he's skating. He's an unbelievable athlete. I would like to see him be able to skate the puck a little bit more and just make a good first pass.
That's awesome, man. Austin, I want to thank you so much for being on the show tonight. Where can people follow you?
So you can follow me on Twitter at ahockey1993, on YouTube, Austin Hockey, same thing. And I also have a TikTok, same username, ahockey1993. Those are the 3 main areas that I post content or, different things on. So,
Austin, I just want to say thanks again for being on the show. Everyone, please go give him a follow on all of the different platforms he's on. And I hope you'll be back on the show sometime.
Oh, I hope so too. I really appreciate it. This was a really fun opportunity. This is the first time I've kind of been a guest on any kind of podcast, so I hope it was fun and good for everyone here.
Yeah, definitely was. Yeah, we'll definitely do this again next season.
Absolutely, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right. So for Austin Hockey, I'm Eric Friesen. This has been the 99 Forever podcast. We're out.